Alright guys, Tactical here, and today we're going to talk about the CWL Ruleset version 2, which was released a couple of days ago. This kind of got overshadowed by the last minute roster change drama with Evil Geniuses and Zotic moving over to that squad. Parasite did that. Now, infamous tweet, I did a video on that situation yesterday, but the ruleset was updated. It's hardly a drastic change, there's not a crazy amount of things that are different, but the map set has definitely been thinned out to some quite significant extent, and we're going to talk through the consequences of that, in addition to all the other details on what may or may not have changed in the rule set. So like if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. And I'll also have a bit of a discussion on the whole concept of maps being removed, because there was an interesting discussion, I guess, on Reddit the other day, which was talking about such issues, and you know, some people were saying they wish they kept more and more maps in. My personal stance is I'm all for variety, but I want the most competitive maps to be played, but we'll get into that a little bit down the line. So, Call of Duty Esports, the COD World League, they tweeted this out a couple of days ago. Check out CWL Ruleset version 1.2. Announcing the ruleset. So this is just the same as the original article. They've just updated it for the new changes. So you see here, updated November the 5th due to in-game changes, including specific CWL gameplay settings view changes here. And I went through that in a video a couple of days ago when I did the updates in this huge latest patch. I believe it was the 1.05 patch. Then they did a 1.06 slightly afterwards, which fixed a few of the glitches that brought into place. But if you want all the details on that, the videos will be down in the description and on screen at the end of the video, all that good stuff. So this is more CWL specific changes. So effectively, in that update, as we'll have a look at here, these were the changes to the CWL custom games. This came 4 days ago or something at this point. So the Barricade got effectively a nerf in the CWL settings, and this is really promising for competitive play if you didn't see my stance in the other video. I really like the idea that they can keep the specialists in the game, as we all knew was going to happen, but they can nerf them for competitive. So a casual viewer tuning in for the first time doesn't have to think like, wow, you know, where are all the specialists? But instead they can see their specialists being used, but they might not be aware at first glance that they're actually weaker than they are in the public match setting. And what could be even better about that is that some random, you know, casual guy comes into the game and he sees, oh, you know, they're using the specialist, but they seem to be a bit weaker. That seems like a better version of the game, because for me, I got into competitive because it was a better version of the casual game, at least in my stance. And I feel like casual players tuning in may have a similar reaction to these nerfs in competitive play, which could be a good thing down the line. So Talk got a bit of a nerf in competitive. Barricade and Razorwire have been nerfed. The Sensor Dart also got significantly nerfed. It only lasts 3 seconds, enough for 1 ping. So that's now been re-enabled in competitive players we'll go on into. The Tac Deploy got nerfed as well. The Reactor Core deals reduced damage roll. It is really still rather strong. I think it is probably too strong. The fact that it goes through walls, like I was playing some Summit Hardpoint the other day, and that's actually been removed from the rule set as we'll go on to discuss, but I think it's the third Hardpoint. I was just standing above the hill, put the Reactor Core down and just killed like 3 guys standing inside that could do nothing about it because I was directly above them, and it goes through the wall. The Helion Salvo rockets deal reduced splash damage to players, which now means it's also going to be re-enabled to try and counter score streaks and specialist equipment. Now, Chance has an interesting point on this, that he wants, basically, his stance is that he wants everything pretty much to be allowed, but when you get to the point where you have to use rockets to shoot down UAVs, etc, etc, it slows down the gameplay to the point of becoming boring. But to be honest, the fact that maybe the rockets could be used to take out a barricade very quickly or something like that, and someone can have it as a secondary, I don't think is too much of a big deal at all. And this is the real interesting one that I touched on the other day. Mesh mines deal non-lethal damage. So these were the changes, and let's see how these have impacted the rule set. So let's scroll down a little bit. The first thing we get onto is the map. So we'll go through those first of all, then we'll go on to what those changes imply. These are the updated maps. So they've reduced the map set for control down to only 4 maps. We now have Arsenal, Frequency, Gridlock, and Seaside remaining. They took out Jungle and they took out Payload. Now this is really interesting because I thought Jungle was a horrible map. I think most people would agree. I'm not really sure why it was in there in the first place, because none of the pros assumed it was going to be a competitive map, and none of them were scrimming control on it before the initial rule set was released. But hey ho, it's now been removed. Payload is the interesting one. I believe Arsenal, Frequency, and Gridlock are all very solid maps. Seaside is very questionable. I honestly think this map is tragic for control. The fact that the B objective is so much further forward on the map than the A objective means that the defense just has to basically 5-man bum rush into B, and then they indirectly control A because they have the map control, and it really does play awful. And I thought Payload was honestly a very solid control map. It seems to make a lot of sense. That the angles and the design of the map, especially in the middle, is a little bit questionable, but in terms of the overall structure of the map, Payload seems to make much more sense than Seaside, and the pros were having some qualms about this, as we'll go on to discuss in just a second. So there's only 4 maps for control. Now, this may seem too little, but then again, the way I see it, we had 3 maps last year for CTF, and none of them were really very good apart from Forest. So we often went to the default of the Forest pick, and it really didn't create much variety and was pretty boring to watch CTF last year. It tended to be because we had it on the same map all the time. 4 maps is fine as long as all of these maps are viable and will be picked by various teams. 5 maps would be even better, but then again, how likely is it that we're going to have 5 maps that play very well on a competitive basis out of like 14 maps that Treyarch produce in the game? So on to the hardpoint maps. These have been cut down significantly. We now have Arsenal, Frequency, Gridlock, Hacienda, and Seaside makes its way back in there again. So Contraband is gone, Slums is gone, and Summit is gone, I believe, were in the rotation. Pretty sad to see all of those remade maps go out the window, but I just feel like with a 5v5 setting, the increased pace of Black Ops 4, and the specialist weapons and equipment, it makes Slums very difficult to play, and also the spawns really aren't up to standards what they were in Black Ops 2, sorry. In the Black Ops 4 version, so it's a bit sad to see Slums go. I would have liked for like old fans to be coming back, tuning into Black Ops 4, see down, that was Slums, played that in Black Ops 2, maybe it's time to get back into watching competitive or something along those lines. But we're not going to see any remade maps in competitive, at least for the start of the year, it seems. Maybe the rule set will change over the coming weeks, and maybe we'll get DLC maps. Imagine they bring back Raid, bring back Standoff. I think that's very likely, and hopefully they'll work nicely for 5v5, at least better than Slums does in the current situation. So Arsenal, Frequency, and Gridlock I think are perfectly fine. Hacienda's also an excellent map, but I'm somewhat questioning the fact we only have 5 maps in rotation. The fact that we had 8, and I thought some of them were reasonable. Contraband is, in my opinion, ridiculous. The water on that map makes it play just like Hunted from Black Ops 3. Don't like it at all. Summit I thought could have been decent actually. With the latest spawn updates, those definitely need to be tweaked because you spawn so far away from the hill that you might as well just rotate at 45. But in the old setup it was okay, and SMGs actually had a chance to kind of dominate on that map, which would create a different kind of meta where teams that are more SMG heavy would go towards Summit if they had that opportunity. I didn't think it played awfully, to be honest. And then you had Slums, which really was a shadow of its Black Ops 2 self, so I can kind of see why that's gone. Seaside, though, I believe is a terrible map. The B bomb site area, which thankfully it's not a search and destroy map, as we'll go on to in a second, but the B bomb site area has a hardpoint near there as well, and it's a crazy sausage fest in there. It doesn't make any sense. You put a barricade down, you put razor wire on the door. Jesus, man, that is a crazy hill for 5v5, and I don't really think the map plays that well at all. So if it were me, I'd consider switching out Seaside for something like Summit again, and switch out Seaside for something like Payload in the control game modes. And if possible, I would have liked a 6th hardpoint map, but as long as all of these 5 are reasonably good, I don't think it's too much of an issue. Going on to Search and Destroy, we also have 5. Arsenal, Frequency, Gridlock are back again. All 3 of these maps are for every single map and mode combination, which I don't mind, but it's nice to have a little bit of variety. I quite liked actually last year that Flak Tower was this like CTF specialist map that you saw from time to time. There's a little bit of a variety rather than, you know, potentially you could see Arsenal 3 times in a row, right? Which is, you know, who knows? So we have Hacienda again here, which is absolutely superb. I love it. And Payload as well for Search and Destroy makes a lot of sense. Thankfully, they haven't brought Seaside back here, but thought it would have made more sense to also switch out Seaside for Payload in the control game mode. So that's the changes to the maps. So on to the specialists. Thankfully, Nomad is still banned in competitive play. They did reduce the effectiveness of the mesh mine in the CWL rules, but the dog is just way too strong, and Nomad is still banned. If they come up with some crazy change to the dog that makes things viable all of a sudden, then maybe they'll try and bring Nomad into competitive as well, but certainly still questionable. Talk has been removed from Restricted Specialist and has been re-enabled in competitive play. I know that it was, I think, banned in Search and Destroy, but maybe that's not the case anymore. With the fact that they made the Barricade and the Razor Wire less effective, it's now been completely allowed, I feel, and I think in the current CWL Ruleset, which is in the game, it actually still bans Talk in Search and Destroy, but I believe that's meant to be updated in the next couple of days so that you can use him again. The tac deploy is still restricted in Hardpoint and Search and Destroy, and this sensor dart has been removed from restricted specialist equipment, so they're trying to allow as much as they physically can by doing these other changes, which I think is a fine way to go about things. There's a few other changes here further down. The Helion Salvo has been re-enabled for competitive play. So these are the main changes in the rule set, and there's nothing really changed on the side of perks. So that's pretty much it for that. So let's have a look at some of the reaction here. Crimsix said control voting was tampered with. I'm demanding a recount. Definitely wasn't happy with the fact that Seaside is in the competitive play, and Bevel's jokes about like Aches trying to get it in or whatever. So it seems like the pros voted on what maps they wanted to keep and what maps they wanted gone, and it seems like the consensus was to keep Seaside, which in my opinion is very interesting. If we look through the comment section we have on Reddit here, like a lot of people are questioning Seaside over payload for control. You know, this seems to be the general sentiment. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Which map you thought was more viable for competitive play? Crimsix is not amused. Seaside is the new Gibraltar, but worse. Maybe he's onto something there. So I wanted to go on quickly before we end the video, a discussion on maps being removed from competitive play. So this is the post that went up the other day, just 3 days ago, with Slack saying that, you know, there was maps going to be removed from the competitive pool. And the way Reddit works is the person who gets the first comment has a much higher chance of getting the most upvoted comments. So people who comment to the post, they see that one comment has a certain amount of upvotes, they tend to upvote it as well. So opinions sometimes get traction on threads that they wouldn't normally, and that's where the hive mind situation tends to come from. So there was some discussion on this thread about whether maps should be removed from the competitive pool at all. I had an interesting discussion with Not Kevy Skills down here on this post, and this is effectively my stance on the issue here, and I don't really have problems with taking maps out here and there. If you want to say that all of the 8 maps that were currently in the hardpoint, if you want to say that we should keep all of them in, then why aren't you making a case for, say, Nuketown to come into the game, for, say, every single map in the entire public match rotation to also be played in competitive? The way I see it, I like to have a lot of variety. I didn't like the World War II situation when it was Ardennes, Docks, Ardennes, Docks, Ardennes, you know, the 5 maps of the series. I don't like that, and I feel like that, you know, again, that can happen in any situation when you have multiple game modes and teams that definitely prefer different maps, but the more maps the merrier to a certain extent. There isn't a point where you reach a point where a map is just not good for competitive play, and unfortunately that's always going to be the case. He makes a reference here to Counter-Strike, and, you know, this is my opinion on the Counter-Strike situation. The youngest map in Counter-Strike is Overpass at 4 years old, something like that. The oldest map is like 20 years old in Train. These have had so many alterations over the years to make them almost perfect in a competitive setting, and they're still not perfect by any means. The fact that Treyarch is just going to conjure up like 10 new maps and all of a sudden 6 of them are going to be perfectly competitive, it's just not going to happen. Unfortunately, we need to maintain the competitive integrity of the game. Someone else replied to this saying that, you know, people like to watch chaos. Okay, maybe that's true to some fans, but that's not true for me. If I watch someone dying to a triple gravity slam, or if I watch someone dying and spawning all the way over the other side of the map, I'm like, you know, they kind of got cheated there to some extent. They died to something that was cheap. They died to something that was a bad feature of that map or a bad feature within the game, and it leaves a bit of a sour taste in your mouth. So many people flooding into the hardpoint. It may be entertaining for some people, but I don't want to see random engagements. I want to see the best team with the best strategy and the best gun skill come out on top of the engagement almost every single time. And unfortunately, on some of these maps, due to the randomness they have in the spawns, or in the hardpoint locations, or in the potential for specialists to be used in certain ways, they're not good in a competitive setting, at least maintaining competitive integrity. I'm not saying that all the maps that are still in the rotation are very good, but I'm definitely saying that out of 8 hardpoint maps, there definitely were a couple that were noticeably and significantly worse than the others, and I'm not opposed to getting rid of those in terms of maintaining competitive integrity. Obviously, we want entertainment to still be maintained, and of course, to some extent, keeping more maps in the game does increase competitive integrity by forcing pros to learn different maps, but increasing that map set out to infinity does not help in either regard, in my opinion. So that's all I have to say for today. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this down in the comment section below. How many changes to this do you think there will be before Vegas? Will this be the final rule set we see? Because with Seaside in the game instead of Payload, it's a very interesting scenario where I mean, apparently the pros voted for this, but generally the outcry is against Seaside being in competitive play. There's a couple of weeks still left to go. These still could be changed, but I feel like the majority of the competitive rule set has been set in stone already, which kind of sets a good precedent moving forward from Vegas, because typically the first event of the year is crazy. Like, there's so many things that need to be altered and changed, and like Infinite Warfare, you had the OSA, of course you had the FG in World War II, and I don't really think there's too many things that need to be changed, but I guess once we see the gameplay on LAN, then we'll be able to make more of our minds up. So thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I'll see you next time.